My name is Cairo Mhandu. Chimurenga name, that's Philbert Chimurenga. The objective of the Second Chimurenga was to remove the system which had been installed by the former colonial masters through an armed struggle. The main reason for the liberation struggle was to restore democratic rights which had been denied the black or indigenous people of Zimbabwe by the colonizers who came in 1890. During the colonial era, there was this thing called the bottleneck education system. There was racial discrimination in that certain normal things which you consider to be normal, like in schools, there were schools for whites, there were schools for coloreds, there were schools for blacks, and schools for blacks were very poorly administered, or the administration which was installed there was of inferior standard. The living standards, blacks were removed from fertile and rich soil and pushed to soils which were very very bad in terms of fertility. Actually, they were moved to areas where there were mountains and the terrain was unbearable. You were not allowed to mix with whites. You were not allowed to drink clear beers. You were not allowed even to, it was one of the highest form of indiscipline or offenses, just to propose love to a white person. You had to go to jail for that. Salaries were discriminatory. There were salaries for whites which were higher, salaries for coloreds which were a little bit better, and salaries for blacks which were the lowest. And amongst the blacks, women were not allowed to work. And even when you get into a town or city, for example, in the capital city or in provincial towns, you were not allowed to walk on the veranda of shops or on the pavement. It was an offense. Only whites. Even toilets, there were toilets for whites and no toilets for blacks. In the form of standard of living, all blacks were supposed to live in what we now call high-density suburbs. And whites couldn't find even one white, even the poorest of those whites couldn't find one in the high-density suburbs. They were all accommodated, either in town or in low-density suburbs. Also, there was this thing, blacks were not allowed to vote. The purpose of the liberation struggle was to fight for one man, one vote. in order to vote during that time, you had to have a certain level of property. If you didn't qualify to vote. You were supposed to prove that you own a certain level of property. If you didn't, you were not eligible to vote. And the blacks, most of the blacks, I can say almost 99.9% were not qualified, eligible to vote, because they couldn't afford the type of requirements in that particular time. Nationalists like the late national hero, Joshua Nkomo, Comrade Robert Mugabe, Chikeremas, Stoles, and others started to mobilize the people and actually showing them the actual situation and giving the people the spirit that in order to achieve these things, people have to resist the governance of the colonizers. Parties were formed, parties were banned, the leaders were detained. In different places, leaders were restricted to move. Say if you were influential, like in this area, you were restricted to say not to move from within your yard or from within your area, or you need permit to move out of that area. They were restricted, others were taken for detention, others were sentenced for a long period of time until those leaders, they continued to resist whilst inside the detentions, inside the restricted areas, and they started to find ways of reaching out to the people, the masses, by sending underground information from the detentions, and until finally in around 1960s, when ZAPU thought of the armed struggle, and before that, when the leaders split around 1960s, 62 I think, then also ZANU was formed. And the aim of these two parties were to remove the regime through armed struggle. ZAPU thought of forming the ZIPRA, which is the Zimbabwe People's Revolutionary Army, and the ZANU also thought of forming the Zimbabwe African National Liberation Army, ZANLA, ZIPRA and ZANLA, outside the country, so that they can train youngsters in fighting the regime through a guerrilla warfare.